The words of inspiration this evening are from Reverend Sean Neil Barron, who wrote them as part of the closing worship service at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly in late June. Reverend Sean serves as the Associate Minister of Foothills Unitarian Church in Fort Collins, Colorado. Like me, some of you might know him from his time here in Boston when he was studying at Harvard Divinity School, where he graduated in 2015. Before moving to Colorado, he also worked at Faithify, the UU crowdfunding site, as a project manager, and served as a ministerial intern with the New England region of the UUA. This excerpt that we're going to read tonight is a bit longer than the usual words of inspiration, but we hope you find meaning in it.
And this is a reading about faith community. It's titled Because Church. And church is the word that Reverend Sean uses for faith community. As you listen to this, we invite you to listen for the word that is the reverent language of faith community for you when we say church. My friends used to ask me, why do you go to church? After I became a minister, they stopped asking. But I never did. Why do I go to church? Church, the place that breaks my heart more often than any other, the beauty of its potential obscured by the labor of reality, that churches are human, not utopian endeavors. Every church I have ever been a part of has never been exactly who they proclaim to be, nor exactly who I wanted or needed them to be. Why church?
I have witnessed professionals violating the trust granted to them, cloaking their deceit in the garb of spiritual language. Congregational bullies allowed to rampage in the name of nice or freedom of belief, causing beloved people to step away, the pain too great to continue. I've witnessed trauma like a puppeteer pulling the strings, compelling us to play out the old stories again and again and again. Why church? Why do I keep going? Why do we keep going? The longer you stay in, the more grief you accumulate. The grief of the people who left the faith, left your church to attend another, or simply left life. And even as the joy of new people arriving rises, you look around and realize you don't recognize anyone anymore, and wonder if that must mean it's time for you to leave too. Why church?
For it will be true that the church you join will not be the same church you leave. Changed by your presence, changed by the presence of every other, that's the beauty, that's the magic, and the heartache. There is so much that changes in the life of a church. The musical stylings of generation come and go. The language and words of reverence shift. We decenter what was once assumed to be our essence to reveal the true liberatory power within. We constantly evolve and revolve around our core, that determination of love to break forth. That question, why church? There is no one answer. Not one could endure a lifetime. Not one answer the same for each of us. Our answers, like stars, forming new constellations, guiding us in every season of life, point us toward a simple impulse. Why church?
Well, because church. I call it the casserole reflex. That when the church hears the news of the diagnosis of the accident or looming crisis, of death, divorce, or disaster, somehow, even before they realize it, the casserole dish is in the oven, an instinct to care just baked in. The same reflex taught me that when certain events happen, you don't call, you don't text, you go. You show up, awkwardly sure, Uncomfortable, of course, but you show up.
Why? Because church. It's that feeling we get gathered for imperfect worship, a collection of friends and strangers united by an almost indescribable promise that answers a question coded deep within us: the need to belong, to be reminded of that belongedness, the full embrace that conveys the truth that all the parts of you, the questioning parts, the doubting parts, the cynical parts, the hurt parts, are not only welcome, but are necessary. That if universal salvation is true for all of us, it is true for all parts of us too.
Why? Because church. It's a temporal embrace, an embrace with one arm ancestral, the other futuristic, converging together. A complex embrace, holding as much pain as potential. A belonging that grounds and orients us to time itself. A belonging that says, you are part of this unfolding story, the end of which has not been written. And here we will face it, not alone or unequipped, unprepared, unprotected. For here we have stories and practices, rituals and music, ancestors, and yes, baggage. You don't need to strike out on your own. You don't need to make it all up by yourself. And look around. You don't have to do it alone either. For you have a people.
Why? Because church. In a society that tells me to be self-made, I need church that tells me I exist because we are. For if the choices were independence or interdependence, there is no question I would choose the gnarly path if we can go together. And it is church more than any other place that never lets me forget this.
Why? Because it's church. It's the beauty of seeing the child dedicated in the arms of their family. It's the 85-year-olds who, when the pandemic hit, became Zoom experts overnight and then taught others, casting off the confines of the physical sanctuary for a digital cathedral, knowing that church was never a place but a people.
Why? Because church. And when my heartbreak becomes too much, caught in the cavernous gap between promise and reality, I testify that every time I mustered the courage to keep showing up, I surprised myself that I could find love over and over again in these broken people and hopeless places.
Where my brokenness doesn't disqualify me when I'm willing to put in the work. And even as certain people grate on me like sandpaper, I feel them wear down my rough places, granting me much needed lessons in patience, compassion, forgiveness, and humility, giving me the chance to practice being human. I'm no stranger to seeking out spiritual community on Wednesday evenings. The first church that I ever attended had a Wednesday night Bible study class for grade school children called Whirlybirds. It was a non-denominational Christian church, and I started attending when I was about 8 years old in El Paso, Texas. My sister found this a few years ago. Whirlybirds was a curriculum where we would do things like memorize the names of the books in the Bible, and when we completed a module, we'd get a little trinket that got sewn onto this beanie. The lessons usually involved a Bible verse and ways to apply it to our 8-year-old third grade lives. It was fun, and something that provided a nice complement to Cub Scouts, which I also joined at about that age. The church pulled from a few grade schools in the area, so I was able to make some new friends who were outside my own school, church friends. I'm going to pause here for a bit because my husband Rich tells me that whenever I tell stories about El Paso to folks in Boston, that I should provide a little bit of context to help the stories make sense. El Paso is in that little western corner of Texas that is tucked under New Mexico, right on the border with Mexico. The city has a population of 679,000, which is comparable in size to Boston. One big difference is that here in Boston, when you get to the city limits, there's a slew of other towns: Quincy, Dedham, Newton, Cambridge, and so many more. When you get to the edge of El Paso, there's its twin city on the other side of the Rio Grande, Juarez, in Chihuahua, Mexico, a city of 1.5 million people. Other than that, though, you have desert in just about every direction. In that sense, it's not too different than other cities in the desert Southwest, like Albuquerque or Tucson. The point here is that El Paso is not a small town, but it's also fairly isolated. Rich described it as a kind of island with its own unique culture. It's very different than other Texas cities, most of which lie hundreds of miles to the east. Exploring that culture would be an entirely different reflection. But for now, let's go back to whirlybirds and Bible study on Wednesday evenings. A few years after my family started attending church was the first time that I experienced what Reverend Sean referred to as the casserole reflex. It happened in January or February of 1977, when one of my sisters had a skiing accident. And yes, they're skiing near El Paso, in the mountains of southern New Mexico. My sister Sylvia had gone with a group of friends from the YWCA to Sierra Blanca, which is a ski resort owned and operated by the Mescalero Apache in Ruidoso. My sister would be okay, but her injuries were severe enough to require hospitalization. It was a shoulder and collarbone injury. I remember during that week when she was in the hospital, our doorbell rang sometime after school. It was one of my Bible study teachers, and she had a large red Tupperware container wrapped in a towel. She had brought over American chop suey for my younger brother and me to have for supper. That was a dish my mother never really made for us, but the mixture of elbow macaroni, ground beef, onions, and tomato sauce made for a tasty meal. And we had plenty of leftovers for the next night. Later that week, another family brought a Pyrex baking dish with a delicious enchilada casserole, again wrapped in a towel to make it easy to carry and to help keep it warm from the winter chill outside. I'm sure those meals delivered to our home made it so much easier for my parents to go visit my sister in the hospital when they were done with their jobs at the end of the workday, without having to worry about making dinner. As a 10-year-old, it was a very early lesson on showing compassion in community. It was the first time I really understood, oh, this is a community that cares about us. This church is more than just Bible study classes and Sunday worship service. We're actually part of a community that can rely on each other. I spoke to my sister recently about her memories of that time, and she shared with me that one of the women who attended church had a son who was a classmate of hers. And his mom visited my sister in the hospital, distracting her with stories about other students. All these years later, she was appreciative of the kindness that motivated those visits to the hospital. It was a simple act, but one that made a big difference to my sister. In the years that followed, there would be opportunities when my family was able to repay the favor to other families in need. And by that time, I understood that this was our community. Like some of the best lessons learned in spiritual community, these were ones that served me throughout my life in many ways, many times. When Reverend Sean named this as the casserole reflex, that recognition resonated very deeply with me. And I know myself well enough now to know that when the instinct to care manifests as a casserole dish going into the oven, there's usually something else going on than simply a wish to help. Sometimes it's staving off a sense of helplessness when doing something, anything, feels better than sitting helpless. As someone who enjoys cooking and appreciates its more Zen-like properties, it's sometimes a way to keep from catastrophizing a situation by staying in the here and now and letting things unfold one step at a time. Earlier this summer, Martha Durkee Newman shared a beautiful reflection about asking for help. She observed that I do better when my community does better, and my community does better when I do better. These simple acts of kindness have an impact not only on the person being helped out, but also on the person helping. These are the basic building blocks of connection and community. I wanted to be sure that this community had a chance to hear Reverend Sean's words. I included the excerpt that Reverend Rebecca and I read in the spirit of centering leadership of young adults. And I'm going to keep my reflection relatively short tonight. But there is one other section of his piece which stood out to me and helps me answer the question, why sanctuary? 5 years ago, I received an email letting me know that this community was starting a new season of small group ministry. Like some of you, I attend a brick and mortar UU congregation in addition to participating with Sanctuary Boston. When I received that email 5 years ago, that congregation hadn't had a small group ministry for a while, and I thought it might be nice to try it out here. I'm glad I did. Reverend Sean mentions witnessing trauma, pulling the strings, compelling us to play out old stories again and again. I truly believe that small group ministry is a very important tool for finding ways to heal that trauma. And unlike baking casseroles, it's a form of showing love by doing very little. It's simply holding space for each other, not fixing, not judging, not doing anything but listening, witnessing, and showing up in love. It's something that Sanctuary Boston really does very well, and I'm grateful to everyone who helps that program to thrive. When someone has the courage to share a disappointment, a sadness, or a life struggle because they trust their small group to listen without judging or rushing to offer advice, those are the moments that I cherish most in small group ministry. And I have to admit that it's a skill that didn't come easily at first. But the silence that follows after someone shares deeply can be very reassuring and a good reminder that we are indeed not alone. We've been lucky that during the past 2.5 years, the small group ministry program has grown even stronger by going online. Zoom has made participating more convenient, and for those in this community who are far from Boston, it's changed the impossible to possible, maybe even easy. Although I sometimes miss sharing snacks during the break time in each small group session. When it comes to small group ministry and being a part of this spiritual community, like Reverend Sean said, my brokenness doesn't disqualify me when I'm willing to put in the work. And even as some people grade on me like sandpaper, I feel them wearing down my rough places, granting me much needed lessons in patience, compassion, forgiveness, and humility. Give me the chance to practice being human. My spiritual friends, may we continue to help each other out. May we continue to help each other with these lessons on being human. May we learn to tune our hearts to the transformational and liberatory power of love. May we hold space to help others listen for the peace within them. May we do this for ourselves, for each other, and most importantly, for everyone in our lives. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. I leave you with these words from Rebecca Parker. The beauty of life is such that it will not let us go until we have offered the blessing we have to give. So let the beauty we have seen become the good that we do. And let us not rest ourselves free from the claim that life places upon us until we, in faith with all those who have gone before us, place ourselves among those who bless the world. Amen.